Good morning, everyone. As we begin our service today, I invite you to close your other windows or apps, your devices. Take a deep breath and center yourself for worship.
Good morning. My name is Sheila Doles. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am your worship associate this morning. We call forth the ancestors and descendants. We call forth the ancestors, people who made each of us, the biological ancestors, spiritual ancestors, teachers, and guides. We call forth those who imagined and made our congregation possible, sustaining it up to this present day. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation, seeking healing with the people of this land, whose bodies and spirits live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomac Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. With this, let us open to the longings and hopes of all the descendants of all nations, that we might live for them today, honoring the ancestors as we move toward healing, so that all the descendants together shall one day know full justice.
We light our chalice this morning, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. This is the church of the open mind. This is the church of the loving heart. This is the church of the helping hands.
We welcome you to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church live stream worship service. Accotink UU Church is a welcoming and inclusive community that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world. All are welcome here in this justice-seeking, earth-healing community of faith. You're welcome no matter whom you love, no matter your identity or heritage, no matter your beliefs or background, no matter your means or abilities, you are welcome here in this religious community. If you're new to Accotink and would like to talk more about this church, please be sure to reach out to me, to our minister, Rev. William Levwood, or one of today's greeters using the chat box. On our website, www.accotinkuu.org, you can check the online order of service on the worship section. While you're on the website, be sure to check our events page for upcoming virtual gatherings and other news. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our virtual coffee hour immediately after the service. We're so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
I like being you, said the reflection in the mirror. To me, you are perfectly perfect. I blushed. Me? Yes, you. And by the way, you have wonderful eyes. I blinked, astonished. I do? Absolutely. They sparkle like stars on the darkest of nights. I gazed downward. Thank you. Your eyes sparkle too. Sweet of you to say. You have a marvelous voice. I gently whispered, You really think so? Of course. You sound as joyous as a songbird, whistling in the trees. And you have a magnificent smile. I sheepishly grinned. Well, Mama always says, start every day with a smile. I agree. Your smile is as bright and cheerful as the sun in the sky. And you are quite smart. I took a step towards the mirror. I do try very hard. You sure do. You're as brilliant as a rocket scientist. I like that you are friendly. I leaned in closer. It's very important to be nice, you know. It sure is. You're as peaceful as a butterfly. And you have a lot of courage. I raised my head high. I auditioned for the school play today. Outstanding. You're as brave as a lion. You're a fantastic dancer. I spread my arms wide. Watch how fast I can twirl. Around and around I went. Amazing. You're as graceful as a dolphin gliding through the sea. I plopped on the ground, giggling as the room playfully spun around. And you have a terrific laugh. Thank you very much. Your chuckle fills the air with bubbly joy. But most of all, I like your heart. Your kindness is as beautiful as a rainbow. I stood up and walked towards the mirror. To me, you are perfectly perfect. I gently pressed my hands against the glass. I like being you. We smiled in unison. I like being you too. I want to be you forever.
We'll now have crafts for you to do. Our Director of Spiritual Development, Allie Mills, will tell you about that.
Good morning, Accotink. My name is Allie Mills, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I think we can all relate to the experience in the story, the reflection in me, as the main character goes through the practice of self-love and acceptance. What do you need your reflection to say to you? Maybe you need your reflection to tell you that you're a good writer, or you're being a good parent, or that your hair looks nice, or that your artwork is really creative. Maybe your reflection just needs to tell you that you did your best and to keep going. At times, it can be difficult to find courage to appreciate one's own talents and uniqueness. I once heard that it takes 1,000 positive affirmations to erase one negative comment or hurtful words. That's a lot of positive affirmations needed to reshape negative thoughts. To me, this means we should all be giving ourselves positive affirmations and affirmations to those around us. If you're like me, it may be more difficult to say those affirmations to yourself than it does to others. But the more you say it, the more you believe it, just like the girl in the story. I think we can always use support from those around us. How do you think you can be a positivity mirror for those around you? Maybe you can reach out to a coworker and tell them they're doing a good job, or compliment someone on their cooking, or maybe just praise someone for their effort. We can be a positivity mirror for those around us. Our art project today is to make either a Reflections in Me quilt, like this one that was included in your October craft kit, or you can use the blank side and simply make a collage. The quilt has a lot of suggestions for how you could fill it out by adding pictures of your family, activities you like, things you're involved in, friends, your UU symbol, things about your culture. You can include pictures or words or artwork, whatever you want. So draw them in, you can color it up as much as you like. And then go over to our AUUC community Facebook page if you like, and upload your pictures. And I'm sure you'll get a lot of positive affirmations. Whatever you decide to do, if you decide to upload it or not, whatever you do, may you always see yourself as you are, perfectly perfect.
Who do you become when there's nothing to hide? By Prentice Hemphill. Who do you become when there's nothing to hide? When there's no part of you that deserves to be covered up or shrouded in shame? When everything that you are can be accepted and more than loved? Who do we become when we do that for each other? Shame motivates so many of our actions. It's a socializing force, one where we're taught to shape ourselves to belong. We're taught to change what is unsightly, and if we can't change, hide. And if we can't hide enough parts of ourselves, we can't belong. We enforce these standards of shame on people all around us. We enforce them around complexion, around race, around weight, ability, creating more and more others.
I remember my astonishment when our daughter Hyatt was born. Here she was, bald head, unexpected blue eyes, skin so pale you could see the blue of her veins through the translucence. Pillsbury doughboy chubby with small ears and small hands and small feet. I was simply astonished by the enormity of love I felt for this newborn being. I was also astonished to realize that her temperament was already instantly evident. The insight and empathy that so characterize her to this day, already there. The synthesis of equanimity and joy, of serious playfulness, of logical discernment, already there in infancy. All right, maybe I couldn't tell all of that in those very first moments, but I can tell you that whenever I received a compliment about this baby, I wanted to say, you know, I really had little to do with it. To explain that she wasn't born a blank slate, that in fact, she has been herself from the very beginning. Our reading from Prentice Hemphill speaks to the ways we lose our connection with who we are and with how lovable we are. How do we come back to this? How do we come back to who we are when there's nothing to hide? How do we reconnect with that experience of being truly accepted? And not just accepted, but deeply loved, loved for all that we are. And what does community look like? What does community look like when we truly welcome our full selves, our individual and collective wholeness? Prentice Hemphill on the podcast Finding Our Way, speaking about the work of Vanessa Rochelle Lewis, also lifts up in our reading the way shame is used to socialize us. From a very early age, we learn what's acceptable and what isn't. Often this is dictated by societal norms and expectations based on our gender, our race, our socioeconomic status. All of these societal expectations are projected onto the background of what's held up as the norm, as what's standard, and what becomes often synonymous with good and right, what's true about being a human being. These are societal norms and expectations, but we usually receive them as children from those closest to us, from our caregivers, be they our parents, our grandparents, our siblings, be they our teachers or our classmates. We're taught that if we can't conform, we best hide parts of ourselves, that hiding is the necessary cost of belonging. When in reality, as shame researcher Brené Brown lifts up, in order to belong, we need to first risk being who we truly are. We have to be brave enough to be vulnerable. That in truth, belonging asks of us that we are brave enough to show our true colors. Sarah Mcbride, author of the memoir Tomorrow Will Be Different, Love, Loss, and the Fight for Trans Equality, which was this month's LGBTQ book discussion book, chronicles the debilitating fear she experiences as she struggles to come out to her friends, her family, and the world. Sarah describes knowing her gender identity from a young age, the joy of playing dress up with two girls who lived across the street, wearing their Disney princess dresses and feeling a dull, aching longing fade away as she was able to express herself as the girl that she knew herself to be. But every time, Sarah relates in the book, every time as I'd play in the Cinderella dress, the proverbial stroke of midnight would arrive. And I'd have to take it off and return to playing the part I'd already learned was more than just expected of me. It was me to everyone else in my life. I was playing an extended game of dress up, a part society had thrust on me. It seemed I had no choice but to follow. I'd lie in bed each night and pray that I'd wake up the next day and be myself. For my closet to be filled with dresses and for my families to still love me and be proud of me. This was what Sarah experienced at the age of 5 years old or so. And as she got older, the struggle persisted. Online in middle school, she learned more and more about the transgender community, about the history of gender nonconforming people throughout time, including their acceptance in cultures around the world. As an emerging adult, Sarah relates, I knew who I was, but I still couldn't fully accept it. I'd stand in my bathroom staring at myself in the mirror, just daring myself to say it out loud. Say it, say it, say it, say it. You know it's true, she would say to herself. I'm transgender, I'd finally say into the mirror. I'm a girl. Eventually, in college, quaking with terror, imagining the responses she feared would come. What a freak. Ooh, this is disgusting. Finally, she was able to come out, and Sarah was lucky. She was embraced by a loving community that accepted her for who she is. I'm not saying she didn't receive those responses she feared. That happened too. And as today we lift up National Coming Out Day, we need to acknowledge that it is still dangerous in America to be transgender, to be gay, to be lesbian, bisexual, non-binary, intersex, asexual. Sarah Mcbride reminds us that a majority of states, and even the federal government, still lack clear and explicit protections from discrimination for LGBTQ people. While an overwhelming majority of Americans presume that all forms of discrimination against LGBTQ people are permanently and clearly illegal, the reality is surprising and sadly far bleaker. And despite our historic progress, in most places in this country, LGBTQ people are still at risk of being fired from their jobs, denied housing, or kicked out of a restaurant or store simply because of who they are. As I said, Sarah was lucky. A community rallied around her, one that accepted, loved, and celebrated all of who she is. But not everyone is that lucky. So while we celebrate National Coming Out Day, while we celebrate the historic increase in equity for LGBTQ plus people in recent years, including in our state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, we need to lift up also the many reasons a person might choose not to come out, and to honor that decision too. This National Coming Out Day Sunday, I encourage you, whatever your identities, to accept and love all of who you are. To quote Sarah Mcbride again, whether it's your sexual orientation, your gender identity, how you look, what you sound like, what you do for a living, or any multitude of characteristics, everyone struggles with something that society has told them is wrong. Everyone struggles with something that society has told them is wrong. She continues, as LGBTQ people, we have had the courage to embrace something that many think we should be ashamed of. We have stood up and decided to live our own truth, not just from a place of authenticity, but so often from a place of pride. We have exercised our individual agency and power to overcome what was once an insecurity, to hold our heads high and proclaim, this is who I am, and there is nothing wrong with me. On this National Coming Out Day, Sunday, I encourage you to think of something you hide from others, something that your family or society has told you is wrong about who you are. Ask yourself if now is the time to come out to someone in your life or to some community, taking courage from the bravery of the LGBT community's example. And if you ask yourself this question and it isn't safe, or you just aren't ready yet, know that many in the LGBTQ community are struggling like you are and exercising wisdom like you are. And know that there are people and communities who will accept you and love you for all of who you are. Communities like this congregation. And may we also, as a community, as individuals, and as a congregation, may we deepen our commitments to welcoming, accepting, and loving each other for all of who we are, and to working for a society that first provides justice and equity for all people, and a society that then goes further and actively welcomes and accepts and loves people for all of who they are. Let us say together this morning, may it be so, and let us be among those who work to make it so. We continue in meditation. I invite you to breathe in, breathe out, find your feet on the floor. And imagine yourself standing before that mirror that we saw in the story today. And imagine just your ordinary self, just your regular everyday self. And say to yourself, I am loved. Say to yourself, I am beautiful just the way I am. Say to yourself, I accept and embrace all of who you are. And then imagine in that mirror your beloved self. That self that those who really celebrate and lift you up see. And give love to that belovedness. Imagine that person in the mirror, your beloved self, looking back at you and saying, you are loved. You are accepted and embraced for all of who you are. And then bring to mind that part of yourself that is wise, that is a teacher and a guide. And give love to that part of yourself and gratitude for all the wisdom that is within you. Say to that wise sage within you, I love you. I'm grateful for you. Thank you. Thank you for living in me. Thank you for living through me, for helping me to be a vessel of wisdom and love for others and for myself. And then look into that mirror and bring to mind yourself as a stranger. All those parts of yourself that you're not familiar with, that are hidden from you for whatever reason, and call to that self as a stranger and send love. Say to yourself that is still a stranger to you, I welcome you. I love you. I accept you. I embrace you. Show yourself to me, stranger, that I may love you. And then bring to mind yourself as an enemy. In this meditation from meditation teacher Don Mauricio, enemy means those wounded parts of yourself, those parts of yourself that cause you to act out in unkind ways. Reach out to that wounded part of yourself, that enemy part of yourself, and embrace even that part, those parts of who you are, and send love and say to that enemy within, that wounded part of you, I love you. I accept you. I embrace you. I will be with you as you heal. I forgive you for the times you've lashed out. May you find healing. And then finally, lift up all these many sides of yourself, your ordinary self, your beloved self, the wise, sage self that lives within, the stranger within you that you don't know, the wounded self. Lift up all of the dimensions of you and send love, acceptance, embrace all of who you are. Look into that mirror with many sides, and say, I love you, I accept you, I embrace you. And then just breathe a few more breaths, soaking in that love. And in that love, letting all the weight of the world fall away. Let it all fall away and bask and float and yield into that love for all the many parts of yourself. May it be so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
Say My Name by Maleka Gisa Fatafehi. My name was my name before I walked among the living, before I could breathe, before I had lungs to fill, before my great-grandmother passed and everyone was left to grieve. My name was birthed from a dream, a whisper from gods to a king, a shout into the stars that produced another that shone as bright. They held me without being burnt, humming lullabies in pidgin. My name was passed down from my ancestors. They acknowledged my roots grew in two places. So they ripped my name from the ocean and mixed it into the bloodlines of my totems. My name has survived the destruction of worlds and the genocidal rebirthing of so-called ones. It escaped the overwhelmed jaw of the death bringer many a time. It has survived the conflicts that resulted in my gods from both lands knowing me as kin, but noticing that I am painfully unrecognizable and lost. They are incapable of understanding the foreign tongue that was forced on me. My name has escaped cyclones and their daughters. It has been blessed by the dead as they mix dirt, salt, and liquid red into my flesh. My name is the definition of resilience. It is a warrior that manifested because of warriors. So, excuse me as I roll my eyes or sigh as you mispronounce my name over and over again, or when you give me another that dishonors my mothers and fathers, that doesn't acknowledge my lineage to my island home or the sense of rainforest and ocean foam. You will not stand here on stolen land and whitewash my name, for it is two words intertwined, holding as much power as a hurricane. Say it right or don't say it at all, for I am Maleka. I will answer when you call.
I am Malaika. I will answer when you call. My autocorrect tried to change it to Melissa. On this Indigenous Peoples Day Sunday, I want to lift up the sad and tragic and unjust history of residential boarding schools. In the United States and Canada, as early as 1887, Native American children were forcibly removed from their homes and sent to residential boarding schools, often far from their families. These residential boarding schools were created with the explicit goal of assimilating Indigenous Americans into white society as an act of cultural genocide so that no Indians would remain. They were explicitly lifted up as being for that reason. At the schools, children were forbidden to speak their native language, segregated by age and gender, which separated siblings from each other, forced to cut their hair, often forced to convert to Christianity, always deprived of their cultural heritage and practices. Children were given military-style uniforms to wear and forced to follow strict military regimens throughout the day. Overcrowding, malnutrition, unsanitary conditions, illness, and abuse were rampant. Many of us are still unaware of the prevalence of these residential boarding schools or the long time period during which they were in place. It wasn't until 1975, with the passage of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, that American Indian nations were able to take over administering their own educational programs. And it wasn't until the passage of the Indian Children Welfare Act of 1978 that Native American parents were given the legal right to refuse having their child placed in a school. While most of us who are not Indigenous Americans have not experienced repressive assimilation of such a systemic nature, as Sarah Mcbride's words early in the service so compellingly described, all of us, to one degree or another, are forced to assimilate, to conform to the demands of a societal box that doesn't honor all of who we are. In my own life, I remember attending elementary school in the 1980s. And while I experienced no abuse and in many ways enjoyed school, I have a compelling memory of the elementary school desks. The hard wood, the flat part that only covered half the space in front of you, like a coastline curving around a bay. The way you would slide your body into that strange, open and yet closed space. It's not a good memory. It's like my body became that desk, that hard wood, that strange, open yet closed space. This is how assimilation works. All of us, to one degree or another, are forced to assimilate in this way. And yet, we also can't ever fully assimilate. Certainly, this is true if you're an Indigenous American, forced to assimilate, and yet at the same time, always an Indian. It's true if you're Black in this country, forced to assimilate, and yet at the same time, knowing your lips are always too full, your Black woman hips too wide, your on today, not considered proper English, your skin too dark. But this isn't true for just some of us, it's true for all of us. All of the identities we're taught to assimilate into are provisional. They're all this strange, open yet closed space. All of our bodies become a version of elementary school desk shaped. I'll use myself as an example. I have been assimilated into manhood. I was taught that my biology made me a man, and yet I was also taught that to be a man, I must be strong, that I shouldn't show emotions except anger, that I should dress a certain way, that there are even certain kinds of music I should like, music that's more macho and less feminine, certain kinds of books I should read, movies I should watch. We are forced to assimilate, and yet we can't ever fully assimilate, even if we're straight, even if we're cisgender, even if we're white, even if we're male. It's clearly conveyed to us from a young age what it means to be a man, to be white, to conform to the expectations of our assigned gender, clear who we're expected to love. And we're constantly reminded that only full assimilation, complete denial of anything that doesn't conform, only that really makes you straight, makes you white, makes you a man. How do we find our way to being ourself? 16th century French philosopher Michel de Montaigne says, the greatest thing in the world is to know how to be yourself. But in the face of all the pressures to conform, pressures exerted through the oppression of shame, which is often visited upon us by those closest to us, our parents, our teachers, our friends, just like it was visited upon them, how do we do this? How do we practice what contemporary Buddhist scholar and philosopher Stephen Batchelor calls the practice of creating an inward autonomy within ourselves? And Batchelor quotes Montaigne saying, we have to remove ourselves from the habits of the populace that are within us. We have to remove ourselves from the habits of the populace that are within us. Those habits of the populace are the way we're taught to become elementary school desk-shaped, male-shaped, straight-shaped, white-shaped. The habits of the populace are the way we're taught that everyone should become elementary school desk-shaped, straight-shaped, white-shaped, male or female-shaped. In this context of conformity and assimilation, practicing sovereignty calls us to a kind of resistance. To quote a portion of Unitarian Universalism's 8th principle, recently adopted unanimously by this congregation, we are called to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. The script is in us, enforced by shame. It's put there at a young age, even before elementary school. It's put there at such a young age that we never fully get rid of that voice. When I examine my mind, I find all of the racist, homophobic, transphobic, all of the oppressive scripts are there. There's a voice in my mind that speaks them. It isn't my voice. It isn't my voice. I know that. And in fact, that's the practice. The practice of sovereignty is to create a distance between ourselves and the script of shame that forces us into a box and forces others outside of the box. This is the dismantling. But the voice doesn't go away. We just learn that it isn't us and that it isn't true. We learn that it isn't our true name. And so the practice of sovereignty doesn't end. It's a continuous practice. Because even when I can say that isn't my voice, it still sneaks up on me. There are still ways that I think I need to fit myself or others into a box in order to be worthy of love, to be of value, to be superior rather than inferior. We need to engage in this practice of sovereignty. We need to find ways to reclaim the exiled parts of ourselves. For a time, I engaged in an odd spiritual practice, a simple practice, so simple you might not even think it deserves to be called a spiritual practice. I wore dance pants under my other pants. You know, dance pants, those flowy pants, similar to pajama pants, comfortable, loose, pants whose primary purpose is not to restrict your movement. I would put those pants on underneath my classic fit dress pants as a reminder that I didn't have to assimilate, that my body didn't have to be elementary school desk shaped, a reminder that I have a sovereign identity. So I invite you to ask yourself, what would it look like for you to reclaim a lost part of yourself, to come out to yourself, if to no one else? to practice sovereignty, and to respect the sovereignty of others. They might be simple and a bit goofy, like me wearing my dance pants beneath my business casual dress pants. Or it might be ambitious and difficult and require a whole community, like the reclaiming of an ancestral language or the reclaiming of a familiar or cultural tradition, perhaps updated, adapted to be true to today, true to who you or your people are now. The residential boarding schools were horrific, and the trauma from that grave injustice continues to cascade through Native American families, as trauma does, cascading through most of our families. And yet the resistance and the healing and the resilience that was necessary to survive those residential boarding schools and to thrive again as a community is one part of what inspired and informed the American Indian movement and the activism for equity and justice that continues even today, and the reclaiming of lost languages and lost traditions that is ongoing today. That is a practice of sovereignty. The practice of sovereignty is the practice of self-love and the practice of resilience. And we can learn from Indigenous peoples just as we can learn from the LGBTQ+ community. We can learn how to survive and thrive, how to reclaim our full selves, how to reclaim our pride, how to practice sovereignty. Poet Meleka Gisafatefehi gives us brave, courageous words for rising up into our own power, for practicing resilience and sovereignty. So I will close by repeating some of those words. My name has survived the destruction of worlds and the genocidal rebirthing of so-called ones. It's escaped the overwhelmed jaw of the death bringer many a time. It has survived the conflicts that resulted in my gods from both lands knowing me as kin, but noticing that I am painfully unrecognizable and lost. They are incapable of understanding the foreign tongue that was forced on me. My name has escaped cyclones and their daughters. It's been blessed by the dead as they mixed dirt, salt, and liquid red into my flesh. My name is the definition of resilience. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so, practicing sovereignty today and every day.
I invite you now to join me in our community blessing with these words of David Bumba. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity. Though we extinguish our chalice flame, we carry within us what we kindled, the light of inspiration, warmth of compassion, the fire of commitment. May we bring these gifts into our lives and share them radiantly out into the world.
Our closing words this morning are from the poet Derek Walcott. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes, peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life.